the United States, the fake regime of Joe Biden, and that whole can of worms. And I'm sorry, but Donald Trump is part of that group. Okay, when he came out promoting vaccines, he revealed himself as being controlled opposition. So don't count on Trump to rescue you. It's not going to happen. He was part of that group. He was blackmailed and compromised, and that's why he went along with the vaccines, even though his own son was injured by vaccines. So we are now in the year 2022 facing a battle, and the key is to remove their control of the financial system. So, the group that wants to kill 90% of humanity, I identified as being initially what I called Sabbatean or Frankist Jews. There was a man called Sabbatai Zevi who lived in the 1600s in Turkey who said he was the Messiah, and that it was up to the Jews to make the prophecies of the end times come true by doing it. In other words, they don't wait for God, they've got to do it. And that involves a giant war between what they call Gog and Magog, where 90% of humanity is killed and the rest become slaves. This is the group that we have been fighting and are still fighting. And I didn't want to call them Jews because the vast majority of Jews have nothing to do with this. In fact, they're victims because they're used as the scapegoat, like the matador's cape, to distract from the real problem. And these people aren't Jews, okay? They worship Satan, or more accurately, Baal, Molech. The Egyptians called Set, is a goat-faced god with a forked tail, which we know of as Satan. So we really are dealing with a satanic mafia who are at the very highest levels of power. They control prime ministers, presidents, finance ministers. Their method of control is to use our culture of obedience to control society by grabbing the very tip top. And people who don't agree are murdered, ridiculed, bankrupted, and somehow removed. And this is what we've been dealing with for a long time. And the key to this battle has been their control of the financial system. So when the Asian Society came to me, they asked me to find Western groups that were opposed to this. And the groups we found were the global warming people. Okay, this is the Committee of 300 led by Queen Elizabeth, which they said that we could save the environment without killing 90% of the world's population by putting a tax on carbon. Okay, carbon doesn't cause global warming, but at least they had a plan to save the environment without killing everybody. So an alliance was formed with them. And then another group that came forward was the Illuminati, or more precisely, the Gnostic Illuminati. These people claim to have been started by Pythagoras, the Greek mathematician. They were against bloodline rule, and they scouted, the 6,000 top geniuses of every age who were not part of royal families. And they want to start a world revolution. They claim to have started the French, American, and Russian revolutions, and they claim they now want to start a world revolution. So these are the groups that we're really dealing with in real life. Now, the Gnostic Illuminati are into meritocracy, and so they're very powerful in bureaucratic organizations like the U.S. military, the agencies, the Chinese Communist Party, and places like this. Meanwhile, in Asia, we were also contacted by a group known as the Dragon Family. Now, these are the ancient royal families of Asia. So we have basically the ancient royal families of Asia. We have the group of Asian secret societies that control both Taiwan and a large part of China, but they're not in charge of the Chinese Communist Party. And the royals, plus the white hats in the military and in the what you call the white nobility of Europe, the people who are of royal background but who want to do good for the planet. So that's the alliance. These are the people who are fighting to liberate humanity. And what I call the Khazarian Mafia, these people who have for thousands of years perfected the art of enslaving people. And again, they do that by either getting the smartest people and the most influential people to join their group, or killing those, or otherwise eliminating those who won't. So they control the very tip top of the media, and their control has been forensically traced to these foundations that control the Fortune 500 corporations. And that's where the battle is raging. Now, this group wanted to, once they realized that they were not going to be able to rule the world from Israel, they came up with their plan B. They were going to set up an empire in Khazaria, which is now known as the Ukraine, and they took over the government there. And what's now happening in the news, to get us up to date, is that they are going to be kicked out of the Ukraine. And that's why you may have noticed Kazakhstan, which is another area controlled by the Khazarians originally. They tried a color revolution there. They used their control of energy companies to jack up gas prices. They sent in a whole bunch of agents. They tried to stage a color revolution, and now the Russians are in there preventing them from taking over Khazaria or Kazakhstan, and they're going to be kicked out of the Ukraine. So their last real holdout is the United States, the fake regime of Joe Biden, and that whole can of worms. And I'm sorry, but Donald Trump is part of that group, okay? When he came out promoting vaccines, he revealed himself as being controlled opposition. So don't count on Trump to rescue you. It's not going to happen. He was part of that group. He was blackmailed and compromised, and that's why he went along with the vaccines, even though his own son was injured by vaccines. So we are now in the year 2022 facing a battle, and the key is to remove their control of the financial system. There are groups in the agencies. That's the NSA, the CIA, the Pentagon, who wanted to, liberate the United States. They thought that Donald Trump would be the key. And so I call it QAnon, Trumpanon. And they got, and what happened was, in 2016, remember, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry was in Antarctica. And I've talked to two people who were at that meeting of 8 people in Antarctica. And they said, all right, we're going to, instead of following the plot that was involving Hillary Clinton getting elected, and remember, Hillary Clinton is the daughter of David Rockefeller, and she's also a relative of Adolf Hitler, this whole German line of the royal bloodlines there. And so they said, all right, and we're going to go ahead with Trump. So they flipped the vote that was stolen, but they just switched Hillary for Trump. And they promised Trump that Trump would not have been allowed to run as opposition if they didn't have all sorts of blackmail material on him. So they promised Trump that they would cover up for his blackmail material as long as he went along with their program. And he tried very hard, and they did arrest a lot of people. They cleaned up a lot of the Satanists in Hollywood. These agency people did do a lot of good work. But at the end of the day, what happened was that in 2020, they ran out of money. Remember, Trump was saying, oh, China's going to pay us $200 billion a year, or we're going to get Venezuela's oil, or we're going to get all the resources of Greenland, and that's going to keep us going. But it didn't happen, and all the military who were behind Trump left the Trump regime before January 31st, 2020. They all bailed out. And after that, Trump didn't want to preside over the collapse of the United States corporation, so he agreed to stand aside for the Rockefeller-Biden group who sold out Asia in order to keep their show going a bit longer. So the QAnon people were patriots who tried very hard to restore the American Republic, but ultimately they failed because Trump betrayed them and became a vaccine pusher, and because they didn't have the money. They were bankrupt. You cannot, they're just so much debt that there was no way anybody could keep that structure going. So in other words, they didn't take the step they needed to, which was to bankrupt the U.S. corporation, renounce the debts, and start afresh. They failed. They failed to do that. That's why QAnon failed. But the bottom line, it was white hats in the military were hoping to restore the U.S. Republic, but they couldn't because they just didn't have the money. All right, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you again next week.
To Doge just for a second. Earlier, the subcommittee headed by Chairman Marjorie Taylor Greene, her and her staff discovered $2.7 trillion in improper payments to Medicare, Medicaid, overseas, to people who should not have gotten it. Some of this room might have missed that press conference. Can you elaborate on what the president is thinking at this point?
Well, again, that's another example. There's a very long list of the fraud, waste, and abuse that Doge is identifying on a daily basis. Elon Musk also talked about yesterday about Social Security payments that are going out the door for people who are no longer with us. Unfortunately, I would say that is certainly fraud. There's also a lot of contracts they've identified that, just as a hypothetical example, are $1 million, but only 500,000 went out the door. So where's the rest of that cash? And so that's the thing. Those are the things that Doge is working on every single day. And I would just remind everybody in this room, this is what President Trump campaigned on doing. He's delivering on a promise that 70.
And swear by my name like they taught my people of Israel to swear by Baal. If they do not obey, I will utterly pluck up and destroy that nation. They're all listed in this prophecy written 3,000 years ago by the prophet Asaph. Asaph was a worship leader for King David, but we're also told he was a seer or prophet. 2 Chronicles 29, verse 30. And he, at a time when Israel was, had one, is he's going to, the Arab peoples had, over the diaspora, had gone into the promised land of Israel. It was called Palestine in 135 AD. It was renamed Palestine. Never was really a country. It was always loosely defined borders, depending on whoever controlled the area. But it was called Palestine. And then in 1948, it became Israel. And so he was saying, I'm going to pluck out the evil neighbors from what is now going to be called Israel, put them back into their ancient homelands. And I'm going to pluck the Jews out who were living in some of those Arab countries there, lands, and bring them back into what is now going to be called Israel. So we saw that happen in 1948. Now, what he had to do, the Ottoman Empire had controlled the Middle East from 1517 to 1917. There could be no Arab states or Israel with them having control over that area. So in World War I, they got defeated, the Ottoman Empire, the Turks. And all of a sudden we find in the 20th century, the lands, the Arabs starting to get their states back. So for instance, Egypt was 1922, got its statehood. Saudi Arabia and Iraq were 1932. Iran, formerly Persia, was called Iran in 1935. Lebanon, 1943, Jordan and Syria, 1946, and then along comes Israel, 1948. So we see that they're all listed in this prophecy written 3,000 years ago by the prophet Asaph. The Arab states got their statehood. This is a sovereign act of God. He said he would put them back into their lands. I'll continue to read these verses and show you how that plays out.
Yeah, now,
All right, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you again next week.